Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, now leasing Phase 3 at the Reserve, and the B.L. Manger Foundation.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבשחים גם יוחד הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבשחים גם יוחד.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua. Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. These are the opening words of Pirkei Avot, Chapters of Our Fathers, a collection of ethical teachings and maxims from our sages. One of the core values of Judaism is the idea of transmission, that alongside our written Torah, our written tradition, we have an oral Torah, an oral tradition, which is transmitted to Moses at Mount Sinai and has been transmitted teacher to student, parent to child, from generation to generation. This evening we have the distinct honor of speaking with Rabbi Hershel Reichman, a distinguished Rosh Yeshiva at Shivat University's Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary for over 50 years. Rabbi Reichman is many things: a brilliant Torah scholar, a passionate religious Zionist, an activist involved in many charitable and educational projects on behalf of the Jewish people, the recipient of a PhD in operations research from NYU. But he is perhaps best known as a model of how to be a link in the chain of transmission of our tradition, highlighted by his profound scholarship and dedication to transmitting the teachings of his mentor, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik Zatzal, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing, affectionately known as the Rav. In addition to directing and inspiring hundreds of students in his Talmud class, Rabbi Reichman has also written 8 books entitled Reshimos Shiurim, based on the notes of the Talmud classes of Rabbi Soloveitchik, where he was first a student and later led the review sessions. As we observe the yahrzeit of Rabbi Soloveitchik, it's a fitting time to reflect on his enduring legacy and explore how his insights continue to shape Jewish thought and education. Rabbi Reichman, with his extensive experience and close connection to the Rav, offers us a unique perspective on these themes. Welcome, Rabbi Reichman.
Shalom Aleichem. Thank you very much for having me.
We are thrilled to have you here, and I know it's a large task because, as we've discussed, Rabbi Soloveitchik had an influence on so many people in so many different ways, in the classroom, out of the classroom, all those parts. And I know that you can represent one experience, but it's certainly an extremely important experience in Rabbi Soloveitchik's legacy. And so before we even get to the Rav, let's just introduce you. Before you even meet the Rav in your life, tell us a little bit about your life and your background.
Well, I grew up a son of Holocaust survivors, and they were from Hasidic background, Belz and Chortkov. Came to America at the beginning of World War II after fleeing the Nazis in Austria. So that influence is very great on me. The survival from the Holocaust, keeping the tradition of religious Jewry and especially Hasidic. And my father was very strong in study of the Talmud and learning, which he got actually from the Hasidic background, but he himself used to attend Rabbi Soloveitchik's lectures a few times a year. He gave public lectures, and he was very, very avid fan of his, and he said, you have to go to that man to study Torah because he's the greatest teacher of Torah I've ever seen in my life. So he sent me there. So that's how I got there.
It's amazing, Rabbi Soloveitchik. Over and over you hear stories like this. I know in my own family, my wife's parents, when they were deciding where to go, when my father-in-law was going to medical school, he wanted to be in the Rav's community. It was kind of this, go there, go to him, be where he is. And so your father saw early on, this is something special. You need to go learn with this person.
He was the greatest teacher of Torah of the generation. Mm-hmm. And he was a magnificent orator, tremendous passion which he brought to the topics which he talked about. And of course he was brilliant and had a tremendous background from his father, grandfather. It's called the Soloveitchik family, was known as Beis Harav, the family of the teachers of Torah in Europe. And he was really the exemplary persona of that school. So he had so many great pieces in his personality and his ability to teach that if once you heard him lecture, you almost always became a fan.
Beautiful. And so you really got to know him, I guess, let's say, as a student initially at Yeshiva University? And this is the 1960s we're talking?
I came to his class in September of 1962.
Okay.
And I was there for about 20 years, 10 of which I was a full-time student. And then when the yeshiva gave me the position to be Rosh Yeshiva, to be a teacher of Talmud in their yeshiva program, I used to go to the classes of Rabbi Soloveitchik whenever I could. So I arranged my own classes to work around his. So I had another 10 years.
That's amazing. Who could say they've been a student of anyone 10 years in a row, let alone 20 years? That's unbelievable. And so give us, I think everyone has their images of the Rav, or a lot of people do, but give us a little bit from where you're sitting. What was the Rav like in the 60s? Just to start there.
Well, he was a very strong, I'm talking as a student in the class, very, very strong teacher, amazing analysis of the Gemara, which is what his basic text was, continuously trying to understand, as he said, what's between the lines, not exactly only what's in the lines. So everybody reads Gemara, we must read the lines, but there's so much going on in between, assumptions, conclusions, and that's why we have had so many commentaries about the Gemara over the ages. But he goes past the printed commentaries into in today's analysis. And it took a little time for me to get into his thinking. One of the older students in the class, when I got in, told me, prepare and try to think of what the Rav will ask and what he's going to analyze, and come up with your own ideas. Then listen to what the Rav said. If it matches what you said, great. And if it doesn't, forget everything you said and just know what he says.
Wow.
And that's what I did. I did that for about 4 or 5 years. So after about 4 or 5 years of doing that, I was really able to anticipate about 80% of what he would say.
Beautiful. And a few questions on that. One is, was he open, if students came in and had a different idea, was he open to thinking, oh wow, I didn't see it that way, and you could shift his thinking? You
could, but he was very demanding. So if it wasn't a good idea, he would you could really get it. So
right. It sounds like the scariest. I went to law school. It sounds like the scariest law school class a little bit. Not scary, but something an element of like.
For a lot of students, it was very scary.
Right. You have to show up prepared, and you were inspired to do the work to show up for it.
Yeah. So I was young and a little audacious. So I would speak up, and the older students told me, "Don't speak up. You're looking for trouble." But I did it, and it worked. I was able to get the heat sometimes, but it helped train me, and it was really good.
Beautiful. And so did you, when the Rav was walking into the room, what do you think was his goal? What was he trying? Is he trying to work out the Gemara out loud, or he was trying to make sure each of you knew the Gemara the way he imagined it? What was he trying to do in the classroom?
I think he had at least a double purpose. I think on the one side, he was trying to get the true understanding of the Gemara based upon his methodology, but he really also wanted us to be trained how to think like that. So he had a double goal. So
I don't know if this question's answerable, but it kind of bring us in. Certainly for someone who's never been in a Gemara class before. Think like what? Like say a little bit more. Like what's the way of thinking that someone emerges if they sit in a Rabbi Soloveitchik's class for 10 years? I know you were in. They ask like the fish what the water's like, and they don't know there's water around them. You were in it for so long that it's maybe hard to zoom out. But how did your brain change, and how did you approach thinking about Talmud-like questions as a result of being in the show?
Well, the Rav basically always was trying to find an argument between opinions. Let's think in a simplistic way that the Gemara is a legal book. So it really deals with questions and answers, legal questions and answers. Now, a lot of the Gemara itself, when it raises a legal question, brings an argument between the early authorities, going back a couple of thousand years, and tries to bring proofs to one or the other from sources, and so it keeps on going from argument to argument, and then at some point, usually there's a decision made which side is the correct decision for the legal system of the Torah halachas, Torah law. Now, as they go through their discussions in the Gemara, there are a lot of unanswered questions. There are a lot of questions which, if you're a reader and you read it, you say, well, what about this case, which is not mentioned in, let's say, the Gemara? What about some other source which might impact on this argument? So what happens is that the commentaries along the way notice these other problems and write about it. So we have Rashi on one side of the page and Tosfos on the other side. That's coming up maybe 1,000 years after the Gemara itself was written. And then there are many other commentaries not printed in the actual Talmud text, which are in other books. And they deal with questions of that legal problem, and many times they have different answers and different positions. So what winds up is that on any particular legal issue, which is a topic of the Gemara, you wind up with multiple opinions about the basic issue, about effects of the issue, etc. So, but many times those opinions are written down and put there based upon a reading of a source, let's say, that the source reads a certain way in terms of the scholar. But he doesn't really explain his underlying principle or logic, why this is the most reasonable legal position to take. And that's where Rabbi Soloveitchik focused. He always tried to find a legal argument, whether it's in the Gemara, whether it's in the commentaries, some argument that they have, and if there's a lack of explaining or understanding what's the basis of that opinion or what's the basis of the argument, that's where he would come in and say, let's try to think what would be the basis of the argument.
Beautiful. So it sounds like you're kind of saying that, there are all these legal arguments that sometimes really can get into the weeds when you're in the text. And the Rav was trying to hold all of the sides coming to the argument and saying kind of what's at stake, what's driving this person's opinion. Why is this rabbi holding this opinion here? And I assume an element of that is also taking into account other things they've said in other places, right? That's when you really get going with this stuff.
Right, and he particularly focused on Rambam, on Maimonides. Maimonides was considered by many as the greatest Torah scholar in the Middle Ages, and he wrote the first exhaustive book of Torah law, Halacha, and
the Mishnah Torah.
Mishnah Torah,
Great.
Right, and it goes through everything which in the legal system of Torah Judaism, everything from prayer to laws of a state and warfare and everything in between. And but he tells you what he thinks the decision is, what the law is, but he never explains why he says that. So from what it's written in the Gemara to Rambam, which is, let's say, 1,000 years, and he gives you what he thinks is the final law, but he doesn't explain where all it's coming from. So he leaves a huge area of trying to explain where he's coming from, what are his sources, what's the logic of his psak, of his decision. And the Rav Soloveitchik, he was a grandson of Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk. Now, Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik in Brisk was originally Rosh Yeshiva of the big yeshiva of Elchanan, which is the main yeshiva, the Vilna Gaon students' yeshiva in Lithuania. Then he became the rabbi of the town Brisk, which was the capital of Lithuania, and he was known as the greatest Torah scholar of his time. Wow. And he focused on Rambam's Mishnah Torah, trying to fill in this big gap between what the Gemara says and what the Rambam's final decision is, and particularly in that, in filling in the gap, trying to explain the logic, the legal logic of why he's saying what he says. Why is his position? What's the logic of that position versus the logic of other people's positions? And the Rav kept that going very much in terms of the Rambam being the Maimonides being the focus of where he could. And he used to say that he thought it was fortunate that the Rambam didn't explain his sources, so therefore there's a lot of room for him to be innovative and explain what he wanted to say.
Right.
He says every so often we do have a letter that the Rambam writes where he explains something, what he said, and he says usually that letter doesn't help me.
Right, because it's interesting, because you're pointing out that the Talmud is a discussion about laws that has sometimes they come to a final answer, sometimes they don't even come to a final answer, whereas the Rambam's Mishnah Torah is kind of just a list of all the laws. So it's very hard to know, well, he read the same sugya, as you call it, the same section as we are, and how did he end up with that conclusion?
Exactly.
And the Rav is adding. So, another thing you're pointing to, which I experienced also from my father-in-law, Dr. Yitzhak Goldberg, which is this idea that the Rav kind of had certain things that he did his way in terms of Jewish legal law. The one I think of is that, like, during saying Friday night Kiddush, the blessing over the wine, the Rav sat halfway through, right? So I guess there's an element of, like, one is you're testifying to the day, and the other is you're actually sitting down to bless a meal, and so they're supposed to look different. That to me also represents not only interpreting the past, but really maybe the word innovating, the idea of, like, really trying to say, no, now that I deeply understand that really what should we be doing is this. Did that develop in the classroom? Did he explain those things? Did he say, I have
yes,
this way?
he usually did. Now, in terms of his thinking and his intellectual system, he always liked to work with two values. Like, we have a true-false.
Okay.
So he liked to always set up this way versus that way of looking at things. At times he thought about, is the law focused on the person or is the law focused on the situation? Mm-hmm. So talking about, and it's called in that parlance, gav v'chefza. So he said one way of looking at things is through the person and his involvement. One way is looking through things through the situation which is there and which is leading the outcome.
Can I just ask you to give an example of that, just so we understand?
Okay, a situation like that. So let's say, for example, we talk about Kiddush.
Yeah.
So in Kiddush, which the blessing a person makes on wine at the beginning of the Sabbath. So on the one hand, there's an individual personal involvement. There's a mitzvah to give honor to the Sabbath, and by giving this blessing and sort of make a toast with wine. So that's the mitzvah of the person. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when a person does that, he's actually sanctifying the Sabbath. It's called Shabbat. So he's making that situation of entry into the Sabbath a holy situation. So in terms of the law, there could be a question of, am I talking about what the person experiences versus what is the outcome in terms of how he's changing the nature of the Sabbath day by making this blessing. So there could be all kinds of questions depending if you're talking about the person versus
the situation.
So for example, let's say he wants to start the Sabbath early, which is permissible.
Saying before sundown.
Yeah, before sundown. So he's say the Kiddush. So he's sanctifying the day, but on the other hand, he himself has not really entered Sabbath because it's not Sabbath yet. So he's creating sort of something for the future. Maybe half hour from now, Sabbath will start. So he's sanctifying that. But right now, he himself may not be in the Sabbath personally. So maybe he can't sit down and eat his Sabbath meal yet. Mm-hmm. So there's an argument about that. You can make the Kiddush early, but maybe you can't sit down and eat the meal because you're sanctifying the day. The situation is changing, but you yourself are not there yet.
Got it. Okay, fine.
So that's the kind of thing.
Beautiful. I want to ask a little bit. You spoke about. I know that you were in his class. You were responsible for reviewing it with the students, and then eventually you became your own Rosh Yeshiva and you were attending his class. Talk to me a little bit about outside of the class. When did you start to get to know Rabbi Soloveitchik beyond the classroom? At a certain point, did he like, you keep answering all these questions? Let's meet for lunch. Like, what happened there?
Well, the thing is that this is a very important point. In terms of his thought, his principles of thought, so a very important point in his thought process and his ideology was holiness, kedusha, and the kedusha means connection with Hashem, with God, in one's life, and he definitely felt that you could find that many places, but particularly in Torah study, you could access the kadosh, the holy. Given that, he was very strong about the idea that there's a private experience of holiness for you as a private person, and no one else can experience that holiness except you yourself. And then there's a more public type of experience of holiness which you can share with other people, and you and others can share that. So let's say going to the land of Israel. So it's a national thing. We all share that experience of holiness as a nation being in the land of Israel. But meanwhile, every single person, he or she has their own personal, individual holy connection to the Holy Land and the Holy Wall, whatever it is. So I think that in terms of his relationships with the students, he distinguished between the open public relationship versus the private. So, and he felt very much that when you're teaching Torah, learning Torah, you have to be completely open and completely accessible and really discuss everything as much as possible and flesh it out completely, whatever the issue was. So for that, he was a super Rebbe teacher. The average class would be about 2.5 hours, tremendous amount of questions and answers, and then after class he would sit sometimes for an hour. Students would go hang around and ask questions. He would answer any question you wanted. That was the public teaching and the sharing of the Kedusha of the Torah with students as part of, as you said before, the tradition of teacher-students, which is part of the Torah learning. But on the other side, he had his own private, personal Kedusha, holiness, his own relationship with God as an individual privately, that he never shared. It was amazing, really. He wouldn't tell us. He would never, I tell you, I never met his wife. He never once mentioned his wife in the class until maybe, I think it was already in the class maybe 7 years, and then I went up to be with him in the summer, to study with him in the summer, and I came to his cottage where he was, an onset, and there I come to where he is, and I was told that that's when he's going to give a class, and he was giving a class on the lawn with his 2 sons-in-law, Rabbi Lichtenstein, Rabbi Torsky, Zechanam Levracha, and then I see a woman on the porch of the bungalow davening, apparently it was a mincha, praying mincha. I tell you, I had never seen a woman daven mincha in my life, never.
Wow.
And I realized it must be the Rebbitzin, it must be his wife. So it was the first time after 8 years as a student that I ever saw his wife. I don't think I ever, except saying hello then, I don't think I ever spoke to her. So his family, his private life was very, very private. He did not share that. And that was I put that into the private Kedusha experience.
It feels very different from like a Hasidic Rebbe, for example. Like, was there an experience of you guys sat at his Shabbos table and he was, like giving Divrei Torah and like singing kind of thing? No.
Not at all. Not at all Hasidic. So that was the difference between, I guess, his Litvish, Lithuanian approach versus nothing at all. I remember once I was in Boston during the summer when he was teaching, and I had just come back. I had been in Israel at the beginning of the summer, and then I came back and I came to study with him in Boston, and I went to speak to him Shalashut. It was already after Mincha. It was So I went over to his house, and we were talking, and 95% Divrei Torah, and I saw that I really wanted to eat shalashudas. It was getting a bit late. It was after mincha, but so I asked the rabbi, "Are we going to have a shalashudas?"
The third meal that's commanded to be eaten between the afternoon prayer and the evening prayer Saturday afternoon.
Right, and he gave me a funny look. What kind of a question? That's a personal thing. Eating a meal is something, that was the message I got in that look. I'm teaching and you're learning and we're discussing these abstract legal things, but we're not sharing a meal together.
Wow.
So he was very surprised at that question. When he told his son was there, Chaim, he says, Chaim, give Reichman a little Shabbos thing. He was also surprised that I would get a little food there in the kitchen.
Right.
So it was not at all a Hasidic Rebbe relationship.
Totally different. It's so interesting. And you mentioned Rabbi Soloveitchik, and I know that was, by all accounts, his wife passing was kind of a major moment in his life, from what I understand. And I did a little cheating. I asked your son, Rabbi Reichman, my rabbi, about that, and he mentioned that I think you went up that Shabbat and spoke to him, like he was to get him to come back, or so. What happened?
Yeah, well, what happened was he actually seemed to have gone into some kind of a depression, and he just could not get himself out of the house. Because he was in Boston and he used to fly into New York every week.
Which is a crazy thing on its own, by the way. So he would fly in on Monday and stay for the week and then go back for Shabbat.
Yeah, right. Okay. So that he did for a long time,
right.
Decades. And when his wife passed away, he just stopped. He didn't come to New York. And it was, so, I've been already in the class for a long time, at least 8-10 years, and after a while, we start getting upset, the boys, that where's the Rebbe, where's the teacher?
Yeah.
And then we found out that he just doesn't leave his house since his wife passed away. So he went through some kind of a depression. So I and another student who had been there a long time said, we're going to go up and get him to come back. So we went up for the Shabbat in Boston, and we didn't stay in his house, of course, but we stayed someplace, and we went to visit him in the afternoon in his house, and discussed with him legal Torah questions. Mm-hmm. And he really woke up, as we came in there. As we started talking to him, he was very down, very depressed, and we started asking the kinds of questions that we always spoke to him about, in which he was always super duper energetic, and literally in front of our face, in front of our eyes, he just woke up. He just came back. It was amazing. And we said we were there for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, talking Torah questions with him. And then at the end, we said maybe the Rav could come in this week to teach us in New York. He said, I will. And he came. And that was it. He was back.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like he was so private. Did you have a sense, of course, the tragedy of losing one wife, period, could make someone so sad, but did you have a sense of what kind of led to that level of intense depression?
No.
Right.
No idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting to imagine, because again, there's so many personas of the Rav, right? We're really in the classroom right now, right? There's also the Rav who gave public lectures and wrote famous books that people know about, and of course there's the private version of the Rav. And you can imagine, again, I'm speaking with full respect and I don't know anything about it, but someone who's in the classroom focusing on clarifying ideas, him having that level of emotional response to something in his life, right? Was it like an intellectual thing that like, I can't believe this could happen to me and I can't wrap my head around it, or was like I love my wife so deeply that being a moment in the world without her, I just can't be. It
would be emotional because his intellect wouldn't have any problem with death. Avelut, mourning, death, and mourning is a big topic in halacha and Jewish legal.
Part of life.
Part of life, and how you do a funeral. And so that wasn't a problem. There must have been an emotional thing.
Right.
And since he didn't share his emotional life,
hard to guess.
Because as I said, it's his private holiness that I I don't know.
Right, and you know, you mentioned how it was so separate, but I know certainly an element of learning from a rabbi is the idea of shimush, the idea of spending time at the foot of that rabbi, like, you know, whatever it is, running errands for them, spending time around them, seeing how, you know, I remember my Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, you know, like I remember seeing once, you know, his wife Blue, you know, who's a wonderful, special person, bought the wrong shirts, and like seeing how he navigated that moment and like how to have a conversation with your spouse when something's not exactly right or right. Once I was in a fender bender with him, and I saw him also how he managed that. Were there moments where you were around the Rav where you took in moments of how the Rav moves through the world that have stuck with you?
Not really,
Not
because
really.
it was really all 99.99% learning. I will say that after he came back, after his wife passed away and he had that problem, he did give a public lecture maybe a year later, in which he said that what brought him back was learning Torah. In other words, that coming back and teaching the boys, and then I guess he picked up in Boston. He says that the pasuk Zos nechamasi ba'ani, when I have deep trouble, learning the Torah is my consolation. And he said in a public speech that I was very much consoled by the Torah, and I've come back, and I give credit to the Torah learning, which very much was with his students.
Right, which you reawakened within him, thank God.
Yeah, thank God that I had that merit to do that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Tell me a little bit around, it's unbelievable. You've written 8 books now, which, what their elucidations of his commentary on the Talmud, is that how you describe them?
Yeah, we call it notes, student notes. You know, I was there 20 years.
Unbelievable.
And he gave, by far and away, the most shiur, the most lectures on Talmud than any other Torah scholar in the world at the time. And probably, I don't know, since when? I can't know of anybody else in history who did this, because he literally taught almost every single day, 5 days out of 7, 2-3 hours a day. And his mind was like super duper fast. Incredible amount of Torah and insights, and incredible. So I was there for a very long time, but even being there 20 years was just a fraction of what he knew and what he produced. And I, you know, as I was getting older, it was, you know, I got to him, he was in the around 60, whatever, 65 or so. And around the year 80, when he was around 80, he was really slowing down. And all the years, the students, and me in particular, thought that he's going to write his things, because he's the expert in what he says and what he wants.
And by the way, he had published many books, but they weren't this. They weren't his commentary, for lack of a better term, on the Talmud. It was things like Lonely Man of Faith, like these like big, important, groundbreaking, world-changing books that he was writing in addition to what was happening in the Talmud class.
Right. So, but really, in terms of the time that he put into things, the Talmud was far and away overwhelmingly the most focus of his, because he put 95% of his time teaching Talmud and maybe 5% in these outside works.
Right.
So and I said it would be a terrible loss for the Jewish people and Torah scholarship for all his work to just be lost when he's gone. And don't forget, he's teaching, there was nothing. They didn't have video recordings, he didn't have internet.
Right.
There was nothing.
A couple photos.
And so and he did have a tape recorder here and there.
Right. My father-in-law used to listen to recordings.
So there are some tapes, but nothing was coming out, nothing. And really, in the sense of the Talmud, very little. So I said, we have to do something, because we can't let such a treasure just get lost. Sure. So first I spoke to other students, thought we could make some kind of a committee to work with him, and that didn't work out because of the personalities of students. And so, but then I went to myself and I said like this, you know, the Vilna Gaon was the greatest Torah scholar in 1,000 years since, let's say, Rambam. And the Vilna Gaon taught students, and of course he had his own things that he learned by himself. And now we have a certain amount of a body of literature which records Vilna Gaon's comments on Gemara, Talmud, on Halacha, Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, and other things, Tanakh, scriptures. But and I went to the Rav, I said, the Vilna Gaon's literature that we have, most of it was written by his students. Only a small fraction was written by himself. So I said, I want to ask permission from the Rav, as a student, if I could write what I have written down, what I know, and I will put into the work. I'll call it notes, not the actual lectures themselves, and I'll take responsibility in the introduction for any mistakes, misunderstandings. So he said to me, Reichman, exactly. And he quotes like 20 different things which are printed from the Vilna Gaon, and the 17 written by students and the 3 written by the Gaon. He says, that's the way to do it. If you do that, then you have my permission.
Wow.
So I started to do that. But he says, one condition, you're going to call it notes, and you're never going to show it to me.
Really?
Right. You're never going to show it to me, because then it's mine, and then I have to approve. So that's different. You want to make it your version, don't show it to me.
Wow.
So I wrote for about a year, the first book on Masechet Sukkah, the laws and the Talmud of mitzvah living in a sukkah. And after about a year, I had 1 chapter out of 5 chapters. And I brought it to him. He says, Reichman, you're not supposed to show it to me. Fine. 2 years later, I had 3 chapters. I brought it again. He says to me, I don't know what's taking you so long. It's only notes. What's taking you so long? But you're not supposed to show it to me. And then when I finished the book in about 5 years, I brought him the manuscript, and he said, you know, you were supposed to publish this a long time ago, and now you're showing it to me. I don't want to look at it. So that was it. So then I published another 7 books, and I never showed him anything.
Wow.
And I keep on, in every intro, I say, I am responsible for any mistakes. You know, any shiur I give where I quote him, it's my understanding. Now I'm on YU Torah has a YouTube channel, and I'm giving lectures of the Rav's Shiurim in Hebrew, actually. And I always say at the beginning of every shiur that it's my version. It's not. I try to be as accurate as I can, but you always make mistakes.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you mentioned giving the shiurim in Hebrew, the classes in Hebrew. Another thing I wanted to ask you coming out of that is, you know, there are a lot of people that were students of the Rav, and they don't even all agree with each other all the time. But they are all bringing the Rav's Torah into their community. Certainly, the modern Orthodox community feels very closely identified with the Rav. But I know another piece of your work has been trying to bring the Rav to communities that didn't understand the Rav in that time. The Haredi community, for sure. I don't know if there's others, maybe Israelis as well. Talk to me a little bit about why it's important to bring. Let's just start with the Haredi community. Why are you trying to bring the Rav to the Haredi community, and what's the goal of that? What are you trying to do there?
Well, there are really a few goals. The first and primary goal is that Torah, the authentic, traditional Masorah of Torah, is for every Jew. Mm-hmm. It's not limited to any particular community. So if it's authentic, good Torah ideas, it has to be accessible to everybody. Mm-hmm. So that's, and for sure, the Rav's Torah is very, very mainstream, very, very important in terms of anyone who's a serious student of the Torah and the legal system and Rambam. So therefore, it has to be accessible to everybody. That's the main thing. I had certain issues because the Rav was the Rav in the modern Orthodox world, and Yeshiva University, and Charedim have their other lifestyle and other ideas about certain things. But that's irrelevant to the Torah. So therefore, I made a special effort here to get it into all the Haredi yeshivot. Especially, I focused very much getting it into the Lakewood Yeshiva, which is the main yeshiva of the Haredi world in America and Israel. And I went, in order to be able to get this acceptance, which thank God we were able to do, I went to the leader of every one of the great yeshivot in the Haredi world. So in Lakewood, I went to Rabbi Kotler and people with him. In Israel, I went to Panovich, Rosh Yeshiva, Beryl Pavarsky. In the Mir Yeshiva, I went to the head of that yeshiva, and I made sure. And of course, I go to the Dati Leumi Yeshivot, Merkaz Harav, Har Hamar, Gush Etzion, etc. So, right now, for example, we published a booklet about Hanukkah and Purim for Tzahal of the Rav's Torah. Rabbi Gottlieb from the organization called Salash, Tzava L'Shem Shemayim, published it and was distributed to soldiers. Hanukkah and Purim now, about 2,000 copies went out to soldiers in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria. The exact same pamphlet I wanted, not just for the soldiers, I wanted it, it's about 300 pages, but I wanted it to be for everybody also.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, I just distributed it. I made another 1,200 copies, which I published, and here and in Israel, and I gave it out to 12 yeshivot. And what's interesting is that in the yeshivot in Israel, for example, we did the Mir Yeshiva, which is the largest yeshiva in the world, the Haredi Yeshiva in Jerusalem. And we did Merkaz Harav, which is the largest Dati Leumi Yeshiva. In America, we did Lakewood Yeshiva, and we did Yeshiva University. And every place, 100 copies for the rabbis, for the teachers, for the students.
Wow.
We did, that goal, I'm very happy to say, I think we've achieved, to be able to get the Rav's Torah into all the different places of Torah scholarship.
And it's amazing. First of all, I remember learning that, right? So I grew up, in my world, the Rav was like perfect, right? He was amazing, and I remember kind of assuming that everyone accepted and studied the Rav, and then learning for the first time that if you went into certain Haredi neighborhoods, you wouldn't find his books in a bookstore, and kind of the work involved in that. And I know it's so important to you to get his Torah out there, recognizing that the Torah is the Torah and needs to get out there. And then also, you implied there, in some ways, giving this away, saying to, here's 100 books, and really putting it in front of people to get it out there. So I feel
I have to give credit also, tremendous credit to the sponsors of the project who financed this, because it costs money to publish books.
Right.
So the sponsors are wonderful people, and they understand the goal is to preserve Torah and to make it accessible to everybody.
Amazing. All right, so we have several minutes at the end here. I know that you came with a list of 22 things, which is amazing. 22 key things that the Rav taught you. Share some of them with me. Give me some of kind of the best things that you either carry with yourself daily or shape the way you live, or what are the Rav? What are your top 22 Rav? Give us a few of them.
Well, okay. Search for holiness.
Mm-hmm.
You find Kedusha every place and any place. Mainly do it through Talmud Torah, by studying Torah. Don't have a low expectation of yourself or people in Torah. Expect the best and the highest and the deepest. That have faith in Jews. Make sure that you believe in Jews forever. No matter what you see today, believe that they will come through in the long run, and keep having faith with them. Live a life of law, Torah law, and also kindness and generosity. Din and chesed.
I want to ask a couple questions on those. So the idea there is that don't lose faith in Jews as a people, or each individual Jew.
I think it's both ways.
Okay.
Never lose faith in the Jewish people, primarily, but also never lose faith in any individual Jew.
Okay.
I mean, he believed so much in this is a Hasidic idea, which I think he got from, because he studied Tanya a lot. So I think, but he was very strong about this. Have faith, always have faith, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And that's why in our yeshiva University, which is very much influenced by him, and Rabbi Berman is a great student of his, the president, we will have faith in every student. We'll take in anyone who wants to learn. We will take him in and we will work with him. I have boys coming to my house from the yeshiva, from all kinds of backgrounds and all levels of commitment, religiosity, but we believe in them and it's paid off.
You eat shalshedes with them?
Yes. I'm a little bit more Hasidish in behavior. I come from Hasidut.
That's right. Can't help it. Tell me a few more of your gems.
Well, there's a certain amount of stability that you have to have, and also change. I think the Rav very much wanted to keep what he thought was mainstream Jewish halacha Torah life, stability, but also be ready for change and do change, whether it's State of Israel, Zionism, modern education, high-level education. We can change, and we should change as times go on, but we have to keep our core stable. So that was a very important
You mentioned
point.
Israel. Remind me, he never went to Israel? He went once to Israel?
Went once to Israel. I think that that situation was, there was a tension there between the nation and the individual. As we said, that he had this concept of the national mission and the personal private mission. The State of Israel for him was very much a national goal and the passion.
Right.
But as an individual, he felt that sometimes, and for himself in particular, his role was to be in the United States.
Wow. So that he was meant to be here. So once he was meant to be here, then running there didn't make sense.
Right. It's similar to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, by the
Right.
way, who has this concept of a person finds his or her mission, stay with that. So he felt that was his mission, was to be in the United States. And I remember once Rabbi Neri Zitzal, who was the great student of Rabbi Kook and was the founder of Yeshivot, the Bnei Akiva in Israel, told me that it was a blessing for the Jewish people that the Rav stayed in America and did not come to Israel, because he said he felt that the Rav really saved American Jewry.
Right. That the modern Orthodox Jewry as we knew it in America, that he was the backbone of that. Beautiful. Right. And of course, he was passionate about Israel. He wrote the book called Didofek, My Beloved Knocks. And, he said, Reshit Smicha Kulatenu, this is the beginning of our redemption. So it wasn't, he was passionate about it, but he felt that as an individual, like you said, this is where he meant to be.
Right. I think that, I get this question, I have my own question about Israel. Thank God I have 5 children now living there, and I used to, anytime I had vacation from the yeshiva, I went, I don't know, this is maybe 50 summers now in a row that I go. Wow. But I have that same question, the individual role versus the national, and everybody has to face that and make that call. So a lot of people just don't want to face the question, and that's a mistake. You have to. But it doesn't mean that you must make aliyah. If you find that your mission or your calling is wherever you are, U.S. or whatever it is, that's your calling. Beautiful. But always go to Israel, always be connected.
I'll ask you, with your permission, a personal question. You mentioned your children. I have the amazing zchut of being a member of the shul of your son, Rabbi Zev Reichman, and his wife, Chana Reichman. You did great, for lack of a better term. Can you say a word about, either because of the Rav or your own approach, like how you think about raising children? Some advice there.
Actually, I was talking to a student of mine today about this. With children, you have to have, first of all, you have to have a very deep faith in their ability to achieve, and never get turned off by today's problem. You have this deep faith about the long-range outcome. That's number one. Number two, be ready to always try to be involved with your children, but if they push back and don't want you, go back. Don't be overbearing. So we want the parents have tremendous amount to give to children, but the children have to be accepting of it. So I try to learn with my kids Torah every day.
Wow. And
I was able to do that pretty much 95% of the time, but any time a child would say no is no. I just pull back. I had one boy I learned with him for maybe 5 years in a row. We started with reading, and then we went into beginning Chumash, and Navi, then we went to Mishnah, and then after 5 years he says to me, I don't want to learn. I literally waited I spoke to him every few times a week. 2 years we didn't learn one word. And then all of a sudden he said yes. And now he's a great Talmud Chacham. So also, they come down good, don't ruin them. That's what I always say. They come down good and just try to preserve what God makes.
Amen. All right, keep going. Give me some more nuggets from the Rav.
Some more nuggets from the Rav. Focus on principles and don't get lost in the details.
Oof. So give me a core principle of the Rav.
Core principle of is always try to learn Torah as much as you can. Always have a high belief in the ability for you and anybody else to learn Torah at the high level. Don't give up, and believe in that principle and work at it.
Beautiful.
Be very committed to the core principles. Belief in Hashem, belief in the Jewish people, belief in the Torah, and the dedication. We're going through a very hard time now in Israel and the Jewish people around the world, but if you're a student of the Rav, you know that your faith is immovable. It's as strong as iron and steel, and you know that Jewish people are good, and Jewish people are blessed and will continue to receive the blessing, and will continue to learn Torah and do mitzvos and get the redemption soon enough.
Amen. Beautiful. I want to ask, you mentioned the importance of learning Torah and kind of like keeping your eye on that prize. Learn Torah every day. You do it in your own family, the Rav as well. I'm sure we have many viewers who are not in the practice of picking up a Talmud, or maybe have never ever picked up a Talmud. And maybe have never read anything by the Rav. I'm not going to suggest that they start with your Reshimos, because I feel like that's going to be an impossible way in, and they might not speak Hebrew. If someone is, they've never really sat with the Rav in any way, and they want to enter into the world of the Rav, where do you suggest they begin?
Well, probably the way to go is to try to learn whatever text you can, and you could definitely use English translations and go into the Rav himself with those English books. There's a 5 set of Chumashim that the OU has published.
Beautiful. Yes,
that's very good. And then there's the Haggadah, which are very nice. Haggadah called Enchanted Evening, which is very nice. So I would read his English. I would go to the OU and look at their website and get the stuff in English.
The 5-book set where it's a similar idea where, like what you said about Purim and Hanukkah, where it's taking the weekly portion with the whole text there, and it's adding from all different places commentaries of the Rav about those pieces.
Right.
I have that set. It's an amazing set. That's
very good, yes. And very clear, very inspirational, and it gives you, it's great.
I love that. I thought you were going to say like Lonely Man of Faith or something like that, but I'm impressed. It was interesting that you said a commentary on Torah, so you're getting people into Torah.
To me, that's his main legacy. We have an old text, and he's explaining it and giving you insights. He has these 2 or 3 cardinal works on his basic ideology or philosophy: The Lonely Man of Faith and Halachic Man. The problem, I personally have a problem with that, because a lot of the language is esoteric. I remember I once asked him, what does the word ontological mean? And then I once came into his room, and I was in his private room, whatever, and I see he's sitting there working on a manuscript, I don't know which one, but he had a thesaurus, which was, give you other words. So I said to him, I don't know if I said this to him, but I said it to myself, and I don't know where he gets the big words from. Take an easy word and look in the thesaurus for a hard word. So I didn't really know if that audience that he had in mind was, I think he as usual, he always thought he was teaching everybody, but the way he wrote it was for people who really know English and philosophical language well. So.
Right, that was a big piece, is that he was combined Torah and philosophy beautifully. And it sounds like, when he was going out with those other books, it was participating in the philosophical world.
Exactly.
Right.
The Lonely Man of Faith is very important because that expresses his basic modern Orthodox philosophy,
Right.
that there's getting out into the world, that's Adam 1, doing things, developing the world. And then there's the Adam 2. The second piece is the spiritual person that we are, and the connection to the Almighty and spiritually. So that's a very important part. That's basic to the modern Orthodox. It's a basic. I would call it maybe the basic book of modern Orthodoxy.
The Constitution. It's the original document.
Right, the original
Beautiful.
charter.
The charter. There we go. All right. Final question. The Rav passed away during Passover, Pesach. His yahrzeit for the rest of time will be during Pesach. Is there something that when you think of the Rav in Pesach, something you want to share with us at this time of year, a Rav teaching on a Rav Pesach?
Well, the Rav's main lesson of Pesach was to relive the Exodus, that Jewish history is not a past, it's a present. And the future is also present. So the phrase in the Haggadah, B'chol dor v'dor chayv adam lerot, that's Mokil, that's Mitzrayim. Every generation, every person should feel he left Egypt. And he used to like to say the Rambam's Girsa Laharot, to actually show that you're leaving Egypt and that you will be redeemed. So he kept on saying that the message of Pesach is that there is no past and there is no future. There is only present. Past is present. Future is present. Jews live from Sinai to the redemption of Messiah in one period called the now. That's his Pesach message. And I think it's a very powerful message. I tell you the truth, when I run my Seder, I spend a lot of time talking about the Holocaust. I want everybody at the Seder to give us some story of Jewish survival. I talk a lot about the state of Israel and the future being now. And that's exactly what the Rav wanted us to do.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Really, such a treat to have you here. I hope people are inspired to learn more about the Rav, learn more about your writings. I know they're in Hebrew, so for the average person might not be able to pick it all up tomorrow, but I'm sure there are some classes in English online. And I also know that you have a book that's not about the Rav that you wrote, Living the Hasidic Legacy, so people can look that up as well, by Rabbi Reichman. Rabbi Reichman, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and my pleasure and honor to be with you, and all the viewers should gain inspiration from the Rav and all of the great Torah scholars.
Amen, and may his neshama in some way have an aliyah from us having this conversation.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.